Back on TYT Sports. So we don't have studio time on Thursdays. I don't know if the audience knows this. So sometimes they see clips like in different orders. We're wearing different clothes. We don't do wardrobe changes.
We just stay here.
We just stay here. We actually don't even leave here. I sleep underneath the desk. So I did up for Facebook yesterday, Charles Oakley, and a short, like 2-minute bit about why you don't do that to the legend number 34. So if you don't know what happened at this point, we're going to first show you a video. Charles Oakley was ejected by about 7 guards, security guards on the Knicks staff, for allegedly being abusive in his behavior, mostly verbally, towards people around him and James Dolan, the Knicks owner, hilariously 2 rows ahead of him. And anybody who knows a little bit of Knicks history knows that Charles Oakley and James Dolan do not get along. So here's the video. Obviously, it escalates pretty quickly. It's courtesy of ESPN's NBA broadcast. So we can roll tape for this one, and then we'll start to talk about how all the NBA players who have come out in support of Oak so far.
There's a
Charles Oakley over there, Mike.
fight in the stands. Charles Oakley is involved in something. They need security in a big way. Security is there. Oakley now being taken off. And this is an ugly thing to see about a guy who played here for over 10 years, who's a terrific player. Oakley and the Knicks organization have not seen eye to eye recently. Oakley's been very critical about them.
This is the scene. Charles Oakley obviously involved with security. Now our own Ian Begley, who covers the Knicks for ESPN here in New York, basically said Charles Oakley attempted to get near James Dolan. Phil Jackson did accompany him back to the tunnel and is trying to calm him down. Oakley.
It looks awfully familiar, Francis. Growing up in the 90s, saw Charles Oakley do that to every player in the league.
Yeah.
We don't condone violence in the stands, but if you're a Knicks, at the time, Knicks owner, president, it wasn't James Dolan in the early 90s, but still condoned it when he was on the court. So there's a lot of hypocrisy. I know you have some tweets, some Instagrams, and obviously some thoughts.
It's because it sent shockwaves around the sporting world, especially for someone that gave 10 years to a franchise and was a great player for them. So it starts off with Chris Paul, who sent out a tweet. Let's go to that one, but it's plenty of NBA players throughout. So Chris Paul had this to say: "Hope that he gets some help soon. Not the right way to portray Oak. Always had my back and the realest person our league has seen. As we move forward, J.R. Smith posted on Instagram."
Like hashtag Uncle Oak.
Yeah. So he said hashtag OG, hashtag Oak, hashtag
once a Knick, always a Knick.
Always a Knick. And then as we move forward, Reggie Miller also sent out this tweet: "If you're a FA to B, why would you play for an owner who treats the past greats like this, or a president who stabs star player in the back?" So those were the tweets, but before we get to the next PR and their response,
yes,
I wanted to touch on what Dwayne Wade had to say. 10 years, he explains, 10 years Oak gave everything he had for this organization, and the image everyone will be left with won't be this picture. It will be the image of him being taken down to the ground last night in the same arena he gave his all to as a player by the guards. This could happen to any of us. Stay woke. We are not above this treatment. So those are what some of the known players in the NBA had to say. There's plenty of other outreach towards Oakley and people sharing their support, and some people disagree with his actions as well. There's 2 sides to it. I just thought there's someone that, when you play for a franchise, you give everything to them. Like, it doesn't mean that you aren't opinionated when it comes to the goings-on in the franchise at the moment. Knicks fans aren't happy. How many Knicks fans are there screaming, shouting, getting pissed off at the way things are going on, getting pissed off at Phil Jackson? And do you see any of them escorted by 6 to 7 security guards? Like, immediately this is where I get frustrated, because this transfers over to any sort of situation where you have an enforcer and then you have someone who's obviously outraged about something and not happy. When you make the situation seem a lot bigger than it is, like rather than a little word in the ear being like, yo, you should calm down maybe. No, 6 to 7, you've only got one thing on your mind. You want that guy out. You want the situation to be escalated further. Like, you're not looking to calm things down. That doesn't mean that he's got every right to put his hands on someone and push someone away. He's clearly frustrated. I just think there's a better way to handle it, especially when you know the world's watching, right? The Knicks is a franchise that's going through a lot. I can't believe I say franchise now without doing my American franchise.
Yeah, look at you lost your way.
I know. But the thing is like, when everything that the Knicks are doing right now is under a spotlight, and there's a lot of turmoil there, your all-star player might be traded, there's some very conflicting views, you don't want to bring any more negative light to it, and you've just put yourself out there as one of the most untrustworthy franchises. People won't consider it to be a loyal, family-like environment, you know?
Not at all. So the news we just got, and very well said, Francis, the news we just got was that Charles Oakley, according to New York Daily News and Michael Kay's radio show, is that Charles Oakley's been banned from the Garden. He can't step foot in there. Dolan said it's not, quote, a lifetime ban, but he said he can't have Oakley doing what he did in the arena. So far, just so everyone's clear, right, the story that Oakley has and what Knicks PR and Knicks representatives have been saying, and the problem I have with this is, of course, Knicks representatives under James Dolan are going to say one thing and Oakley's going to say something else. But there seems to be far too many eyewitnesses, about 18,000 to be specific, that fit in the Garden, that seem to back up the fact that Oakley bought a ticket, right? And I can see why a situation like this would escalate. When he's maybe talking crap about James Dolan 2 rows behind him and the owner of the Knicks organization is sitting there, probably doesn't want to hear it anymore, and tells security to get him out of the arena. You have no legal grounds to kick that guy out of your arena, besides the fact that you own the team. But you have no real, I shouldn't say legal, justified grounds to kick him out of the arena for for throwing some words around, especially because, like I said, 18,000 fans are booing Carmelo Anthony and calling Ron Artest an opposing player an MVP in a recent game. So Oakley's sitting there just talking some smack, talking shit, and all of a sudden 7 guards coming up to him and forcefully throwing him out of the game. You're talking about 18,000 Knicks fans who adore, I'm talking in the arena, who adore Charles Oakley and will never adore James Dolan. And you're simply just having Dolan shove even more of a bigger log between the fans and the players. And it just seems ridiculous that you're at one point you can turn and say, man, Charles Oakley, the enforcer of the Knicks. You weren't gonna F with 90s teams because there's always one guy, Dennis Rodman, the enforcer of the Bulls. At times, Karl Malone, the enforcer of the Utah Jazz. And Charles Oakley was the foundation of like the heart and soul of that team. He was never the best player on the team, but one stat that Tommy Beer recently shared via his Twitter, Charles Oakley won 70 playoff games with the Knicks.
Wow.
James Dolan, since he's owned the Knicks, has won 9.
Wow. And
it's been 17 years. So you don't want to already take a pissed off fan base and throw out one of their living legends that we adore because of the heart he actually played with, and you can call it violent heart, but it was no different than what anybody else was doing during the time. It's only going to separate it more. So now you're also having James Dolan, who, and I don't like to just name call anybody, but sometimes it warrants itself. James Dolan's a pussy. He's afraid of Charles Oakley. He actually feels threatened by Charles Oakley. Like Charles Oakley would ever go up to James Dolan and actually hit him or be violent with him. I don't know what happened to Sticks and Stones, a phrase that we all grew up with, but it seems like words have become more hurtful to some people than actual actions.
It's very true, and it's reminiscent of a lot of things we see going on today where people will just, it's almost like you cannot get mad at something, and if you're mad at something, if you don't agree with something else, you either get the person out of the room. Don't know how many times Trump did it in a press conference when he didn't like a question. Fake news are out. Or you just tarnish them as fake news, or they're negative, like overrated, doesn't matter. So I don't mean to cross it over that, but this does remind me of that. It just reminds me of someone spoiled brat that has been grown up not wanting to listen to any forms of criticism. And they're merited criticisms. If he's upset about the Knicks, get in line. There's a million people get it. If you're going to throw him out, you've got another 25,000 people to throw out because they're not happy with what's going on. And then when you look at the actual case, he's arrested and charged now with 3 counts of misdemeanor assault. Like, that all escalated from you not wanting to just face the fact that your team and your problems arise from a very similar place, not facing issues.
Why aren't the security guards that escalated the situation being assigned for 3 counts of misdemeanor instigation?
Yeah.
Because misdemeanor assault. Frank Isola, the New York Daily News, actually waited outside the building. I heard there was 2 cops that had free Oakley signs. 2 cops, 2 New York City cops.
That's amazing.
We're sitting there with free Oakley signs. It's just, like, this is what rock bottom looks like for the Knicks franchise and organization. Fortunately, because at this point, you can only go up from here. Like, you really can't go any lower. But one of the things that I think is important to state here is that Charles Oakley is not what's wrong with the Knicks. This just kind of will throw a little bit overshadowing of everything else that's going on. I just find there's a lot of irony in this, and I tried to shove it into a 2-minute video yesterday. Phil Jackson reportedly called Michael Jordan to ask Charles Oakley to calm him down at one point, right, when he's getting thrown out. So that's like allegedly. But so let's say, just for shits and giggles, Phil Jackson was trying to calm down Charles Oakley in the tunnel. The same Phil Jackson who said, quote, "You can't change a spot on a leopard," on Twitter about Carmelo Anthony. Not to his face, just on Twitter to Carmelo Anthony. You can't change a spot on the leopard. You know what you're dealing with.
Yeah.
You coached against. You beat Charles Oakley's Knicks team a lot when you were coaching the Bulls. You know exactly who you're dealing with. So why are you so contradictory in the way that you're using this? You can't change a spot on a leopard. Cool. Means you can't change Charles Oakley either.
And I think what I wanted to reiterate is what I meant by, like, the fact that this is escalated now, and let's take away the fact that is a legend in the Knicks, so he's just a normal fan, is the fan's going to be the one that's going to have to pay the consequence. James Dolan's not going to have to pay any consequence, right? And that's what I mean by this distrust between ownership and the lack of communication and lack of understanding what fans want for the Knicks between management and between fans. Like, fans don't need you to go and trade and get superstars in, like, or washed up players. No offense, like Derrick Rose has done whatever. But
you don't have to say no offense anymore.
It's right.
Offense.
Offense firmly. It's like, rather than building a foundation of a team that has the heart like someone like Charles Oakley, they just want to go in and play by the rules of Phil Jackson and please that kind of overarching theme that, oh, we're the Knicks, we're a staple of basketball, this is the way it's going to be, rather than like maybe taking a Celtics-like approach and building a team that has those fundamentals and that heart and listening to what the fans are actually like out there calling for. And instead, you just don't want to face your issues. You're just like, nah, throw them out. Take them out. I don't want to care about it.
Look at the difference. I'm not comparing Charles Oakley to Paul Pierce, right? But we just talked about how Paul Pierce was welcomed back to TD Garden. An opposition who's played on now a couple of different teams. But, and again, I have to state this. Paul Pierce and Charles Oakley, Paul Pierce is a surefire Hall of Famer. I don't think Charles Oakley is. But look at the way that they welcome him back, right? If Paul Pierce was sitting in the stands of the TD Garden and he was even wearing a different team's jersey, those fans would still adore him.
Yeah.
And the owners would adore him. And the executives wouldn't make him buy a ticket. I still think this goes all the way back to the fact that Charles Oakley needs to buy a ticket.
Yeah.
He sold out that arena alongside guys like John Starks and Patrick Ewing. He's part of the reason that the Knicks rose to greatness and made a finals in 1999. That was a lot of Oakley, right? That was a lot of Oakley fighting all of the Heat. He once fought all of the Supersonics. He once fought Charles Barkley in the preseason. I mean, like, this is a guy who was not going to take no for an answer. So I just think it's you knew what you were getting into. If you thought Charles Oakley was going to sit there with 7 guards around him when Alonzo Mourning of the Heat couldn't do it 15, 20 years ago, and Barkley couldn't do it 20 years ago, the guards can't do it now. So it's just, again, I don't like the idea of name calling, but like James Dolan is just a giant pussy. The best thing, I've heard someone say this a couple of times, I think it was Michael Rappaport, the comedian. The best thing that happened to James Dolan was being born into the Dolan family because they owned Cablevision and MSG Network, and he got to inherit that.
Like so many. All right.
Still a fan.
Comments
I'm going to buy my Oakley jersey.
Do it. I'm sure they're selling out.
Now they're probably going to sell. It's probably be like one of the number 1 selling jerseys.
How good would it be if the whole garden
just
had
all were Oakley
and then
jerseys.
Oakley, and then turned around like in the middle of the game, and everyone just seen the Oakley.
I like somebody said also that we need a slow chant Oakley the whole time. Boo Dolan out of the Garden. Look what the Pats fans did to Goodell. Now we have someone to do that to.